Hi, this is Zubair and you are watching Learn English with Zubair UOP. In this video, we are going to discuss literature in Elizabethan age. In the previous video, we discussed the general ethos in England when Queen Elizabeth became the ruler of England in 1558 to 1603. If you remember, we established how Queen Elizabeth was successful in bringing about Renaissance in England, which was marked by prosperity, education, trade, religious coexistence or tolerance, and economic growth. Queen Elizabeth was credited for all these things when she was a ruler. We also talked about her contribution to art and literature. In this video, we are going to discuss literature in Queen Elizabeth's time particularly. We are going to talk about the general attributes of the literature. We will be discussing all the genres separately: drama, poetry, prose, and criticism. And lastly, we will be talking about famous dramatists, poet, prose writers, and critics during her age. Talking about the general features of the age, you need to remember that this is one of the time periods in the history of English literature which is marked by prolexity or abundance of literature. Almost all genres were produced, whether you speak of drama, poetry, criticism, or prose. There is fictional prose, there is non-fictional prose. Times were such. England in particular, and Europe in general had seen a renaissance for 1000 years. Different societies in Europe have been thirsty for knowledge. They have been waiting for this phenomenon to occur. Once the time has come, people started producing all forms of literature across Europe. And this is also true of England. When Queen Elizabeth brings about a Renaissance, we see that all form of literature was produced. To this must be added, which is somehow the next important property of the literature during the Queen Elizabeth age, which is the use of imagination. It may be a coincidence, but the writers during Queen Elizabeth's age were bestowed with a high sense of imagination. They were such creative artists in all genres, whether it is drama or poetry. You come across such magnificent writers as Christopher Marlowe, Thomas Kidd, William Shakespeare, Philip Sidney, Edmund Spenser, Sir Walter Raleigh. All these artists, poets, dramatists contributed a big deal in their specific areas and aided to the big body of knowledge during Queen Elizabeth's time. It is because these people were not bowed down by any moral superior authority. They had freedom, the license to contribute, to produce, to create. There was no check on them. There was no outward force that could suppress them into certain ideology, and it helped them big deal to write to appease people as well as to appease their creativity. This use of imagination is such an important tool of creativity in the time when these artists, writers appeared during the Queen Elizabeth's time. Another important feature of the age is emotion or sentiment. Emotions and sentiments run very high in all genres, whether it's poetry or drama. Even prose, which is ordinarily seen as a genre that should be straightforward, direct about some ideas, it is not free from imagination or the use of emotions and sentiments. When we speak of emotions and sentiments, it's always the emotions or sentiments of the writers or the poets which ruled the roost. They were predominant. Writers were so carried away by their personal emotions that they gave vent to to the emotions and sentiments and passion in their poetry, prose, and particularly in drama. Another important attribute of the age or of the literature of the age is patriotism. England became very important, or somehow Queen Elizabeth was able to inculcate into people's mind that country came first. So majority of the works that we read somehow aggrandize or praise England, or the intellectual heights that England could achieve or had already achieved, its might, its army, and its trade. And writers were admiring the presence of Queen Elizabeth among themselves, calling her darling queen, our queen, or Shakespeare would call my queen. With these kinds of phrases and these kinds of sentences, the sense of patriotism was highlighted. Many of the songs were written, kids would praise Queen in their songs. So this became a norm in the society, and it also became a part of literature in the time that people were writing patriotic songs during the uh, during the Queen Elizabeth's time. Another major feature of the literature of the time is Romanticism. Romanticism is a big word. It has many meaning. It should be differentiated from Romantic movement in 19th century, which began with Wordsworth and St. Coleridge. Yet there are some similarities. For example, Romanticism, whether of Wordsworth's movement or of Shakespeare's time, both believe in paying attention or writing about something strange, or writing about passion, feelings. Or Romanticism means to address beauty, to address aesthetically. In all these senses, Shakespeare and other writers during Elizabeth's age were highly romantic, speaking of their adventure, adventure of love, adventure of heroism, adventures of war, or adventures of knights who would fight for their country or for the ideology that they professed. So, in all these things, the spirit of England was highly romantic in the time. So, these are more or less some of the features which you will find running across all the genres. And then there are going to be certain attributes which are specific to genres. We will talk about all these genres separately, and you may note down a few of them as you are speaking of the Elizabethan age. Speaking of the genres, you need to remember that drama was the most superior genre which was produced during Elizabethan age. It saw the climax of its height. Never in history you find drama achieve such greatness as it did in Elizabethan age. After Elizabethan age, the decline begins and it never sees the glory until for a short time during 20th century. It's a different debate, but one must remember that during Elizabethan age, drama did see such important heights. Hats off to the creative artists during Queen Elizabeth age. Different kinds of plays were produced. The age produced some magnificent tragedies, comedies, and history plays. Tragedies became an improved form of interlude and morality plays in the medieval age. Shakespeare's and other dramatists took plot from writers in antiquity and Greek and Roman artists and gave them English treatment. In the process that these artists were trying to write drama in all forms, whether tragedies, comedies, or history plays, They took the spirit, or you may say in technical terms, the plot, and made those plays very English in nature. They would now appeal to English audience in terms of English ambience and in terms of English language. The first record of a comedy play that we have in Elizabethan age is known as Ralph Roister Doister, and of tragedy that we know of is Gorboduc. These two plays were written in the decade between 1550 to 1560. The real glory of English drama was brought by a set of dramatists known as university wits. They are known university wits because all these poets, with the exception of one Thomas Kett, they read in the universities of Oxford and Cambridge. They were highly well read, bestowed with a great sense of intellect, and a very creative artist. That's why they were known as wits. These poets, dramatists, paved the way for one of the greatest timeless artists in English history, known as William Shakespeare. Some writers argue that if there were no university wits, there would have been no Shakespeare. The statement is true to some extent. These university wits, because of the fact that they were well read, they could understand Greek and Latin plays. They read them and interpreted them into English language. Later, when Shakespeare appears, it was easy for him to approach plays, both comedies, tragedies, as well as history plays. So many of the plays that Shakespeare wrote, they are either the adoption of what Thomas Nash wrote, or Thomas Kett, or Christopher Marlowe, or Robert Greene wrote for that matter. We will be discussing William Shakespeare as dramatist in a separate video. Wait for that one. Another genre that prospered during the Elizabethan age was poetry. Like we said in the general properties of poetry, that it was like we said in the general properties of literature, that emotions and passions were such a hallmark of the age. Poetry of the age is not free from personal emotions. The kind of poetry which reflects personal emotions is known as lyrical poetry. Lyrical poetry flourished in all form, whether elegies, odes, or pastoral poetry. But the most important and dominant form of lyrical poetry that appeared was sonnet. 14 lines poems which deal with the theme of love. Sonnet as a genre was introduced by Francisco Petrarch in Italy in 12th century. Around 1530, 1540, it was transported to England by Thomas Wyatt and Earl of Surrey. Thomas Wyatt and Surrey followed Francisco Petrarch's style of writing sonnets, according to which a sonnet would be divided into two parts, an octave and a sestet. Octave 8 lines would introduce a conflict, and last 6 lines would introduce volta, or change of thought, or reversal of mood. The man who familiarized or popularized the masses of England with the sonnet was William Shakespeare, and his sonnets came to be known as Shakespearean sonnets. He introduced a different scheme of stanza. His stanza could be divided into four parts: three parts quatrain and one last couplet. There was a scheme which ran through the sonnet. In first four, he would introduce the conflict. Second word would lead to the development, and in third one, he would be intensifying the conflict. The last couplet would introduce volta, resolution or change of thought, or change in mood. Many poets appeared, and some of them became timeless. The list of Elizabethan poets is big, beginning with William Shakespeare, poets like Philip Sidney, Edmund Spenser, and then this long list of metaphysical poets. We will be doing a separate video on metaphysical poets. Stay tuned for that. All these poets from list of metaphysical poets, William Shakespeare, Edmund Spenser, and Philip Sidney, are known for their individualistic feature. For instance, Edmund Spenser is known for his mythological, symbolical treatment of poetry. He is also known for his imagery and for the fact that his poetry reads like songs. Philip Sidney is known for elements of his personal emotions, such personal emotions which would represent heightened feelings. Metaphysical poets have their own long list of characteristics, and I said we will be doing it in the next video. Wait for that one. Next important genre that flourished during Elizabethan age was prose. Both fictional and non-fictional prose flourished. Fictional prose came to be known as poetic prose, which has had more of elements of poetry. For example, for its meter, for its meter, for its rhyme schemes that would be used, long sentences, decorated vocabulary, and highly ornamented style. Prose would also make use of narration. There would be some kind of romantic tales, for instance, as John Lilly did in Euphues or Philip Sidney did in Arcadia. Both stories, both prose works talk about the adventure of the lover for the sake of their beloved. There were also writers who were writing non-fictional prose, which, according to the very definition, served the purpose of prose. For instance, prose writers like Francis Bacon, Fowler, Brown, etc. also flourished during this time. Lastly, the age is also known for the appearance of criticism during this field. One of the most important works that we can mention during the time is the Defense of Poesy by Sir Philip Sidney, a strong worded defense of art and poetry in particular, in response to the charges that were fixed by a priest named Gaussen. In this treatise, he defended poetry in such brilliant terms that is still used as an example by many when they speak in favor of art and literature. That is how you can conclude the entire literature by speaking about the drama, poetry, prose, and criticism. You need to add dramatists, poets, prose writers to the list in order to make this study complete. Thank you so much. See you in the next video about metaphysical poets. Once we have talked about metaphysical poets, the study of Elizabethan age would be complete. Thank you so much. If you like the video, do press the like button, share it with your friends, and never forget to subscribe to this channel. There is so much more on this channel. Thank you.